James Gunn's in, Superman's out. Let's take a minute and actually ask, is Superman still relevant with DC Comics? So there's been a ton of news surrounding Superman, a ton of talk. The internet is exploding. People are big mad. People are excited. The hashtag trending is fire James Gunn. So this needs to be talked about. And we need to look at the optimistic side to all of this. And to help me do this is my good friend, new guy, Ryan. What is happening, brother?
What is going on, man?
The internet
The world is
cracking.
right. The world is going crazy with Superman news.
Yeah, so we're going to jump right into it. So Henry Cavill posted just a few days ago that he had a meeting with James Gunn and Peter Safran, the two people in charge of the entirety of the DC Universe films and stuff, and had a meeting with them. And even though just 2 months ago we saw him return to the big screen for that little couple seconds of Black Adam, he had made the official announcement that his time with the Cape is done. And he did have some nice words to say. He thanked people for their support. He also said it's definitely thank you to all the people that followed him for all this time. And it's definitely an appropriate time to mourn, but don't forget Superman's essence, his character, and everything he stands for has not gone anywhere and will live on forever. And then following hot on the heels of that, James Gunn added a little bit of clarity to it. Not much, but he put up a Twitter post talking about how they had that conversation with Henry and moving forward with what they're doing with the restructuring of DC, which we won't see what that looks like until next year. Like nothing, no 2024 really. We won't actually be seeing stuff from that. But he said that, yes, in fact, it is true. Henry is out because they're going to be going a different direction with this character. They want to do something a little bit younger. They promise they're not doing an origin story, but it seems like they're just looking for a fresh start and a younger Superman to really have to run with for a while. So what are your thoughts on that? What are your takeaway? What are some important things to really keep in mind here? But let's stick to as much of the facts as we can because the internet is riddled with just ridiculousness right now.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like, I think that Cavill was a great Superman. I don't think he was ever given any well-written Superman content to play with. And so for me, like, it's sad to see him go, but at the same time, like, I'm more excited for the mission than the moment. And so in the moment, yeah, it sucks to see him go, but the mission is to create a better film universe for all of these DC characters and for all of these films and TV and whatever else are tying into it. And so I think in the sense of like the mission and moving forward with what we want and what we need as fans, I think this is the right move.
I couldn't agree more. And you've known me long enough, and if you watch the channel, you know I'm a huge Snyder fan. Unapologetically been a Snyder fan since the day I got on here. I am not a Snyder troll or Snyder bot or whatever you see that's become such a toxic thing to be. I absolutely love Henry Cavill as Superman. I absolutely understand people's grievances with him. And the internet has absolutely blown my mind with the amount of people coming out just being mad, this and that, because I'll tell you one thing, as a diehard fan of this stuff, from Man of Steel till now, I don't remember ever seeing any of these people. None of them. There is no outcry like this until he's gone. This is, in my opinion, just an internet. Yeah, it's just an internet outrage kind of thing happening. People being big mad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think anytime there's some sort of controversy, right? Like, nobody was really that big into, like, the whole Snyder thing. But then once it got, like, put off, you know, then all of a sudden we had the Snyderverse hashtag lit up, you know, and it's like, where were all of these people when they needed tickets at the box office for it, you know? Then we get the Snyderverse, nobody really watched it except for the hardcores, and then it was pretty silent, and then Cavill loses his position as Superman, and suddenly everybody was a Cavill Superman fan. Like, again, the box office never reflected what people respond to, and so I think at the end of the day, like, it kind of sucks sometimes, but your wallet is what tells these companies what they should do next, because they're in business. They need to make money. So if they're making money, that's the direction they're going to go in. Nobody turned out. Nobody put money in their pockets. So they were like, well, let's head in a new direction.
And on top of that, like, it seems like the narrative that everyone's attaching themselves to is he was a great Superman. He just didn't have a good shot. Well, there was actually 3 full-length films, 4 if you count the Snyder Cut with him in them, and none of them were well received. They just weren't. So it's hard for me to think like this is coming from a guy that would love to see Man of Steel 2, that would love to see it carry on. But I fully understand this new direction. But how are you supposed to build something successful with that foundation? I don't get, as well as the unfortunate and uncontrollable events of what happened with the Snyderverse from Warner Brothers' legendary era of studio interference with the beginning and inception of this universe. It wasn't just superhero movies they were interfering with, it was all of their stuff. They would come in at the back end, re-edit, all this and that, and just trash their own movies unintentionally, thinking that they were doing them a favor. It's been shattered from the start. So I really feel like, as a massive DC fan, that this is the smartest way to go. It's one of those, it's going to sting for a minute. It should be better on the back end. At this point, I'm going to have to take James Gunn's track record and just trust in the process. I'm sure there's going to be more things that come along that are going to hurt. We do have a nice slate of films next year coming out that unfortunately won't go very far, obviously. But I'm excited to see if they transition into this new era or if it's just a clean cut into a new era. We still don't know is the point. But right after the first of the year, James Gunn did post that he'll be giving more information on the direction and some of the stuff that we should be able to expect as fans. So the important takeaway here is all we know is they're doing something new. People are crying reboot, crying this, but really there's not another practical way to go to ensure success, to ensure you have a fair shot at success at least. Otherwise, you're just moving forward with your hands tied behind your back.
Yeah, and I think what he's released so far, knowing that there's still more news and more information to come after the first of the year, the fact that he told us, like, we're getting a new Superman, they're moving in a younger direction, and they're not going to do necessarily an origin story, but they are looking at an earlier point in Superman's history and career. I'm really excited for it, but I think that brings the real question of this video up. Is Superman even still relevant? Why are we going to start with Superman if so many people are kind of down on the character in the first place? So I think that's the biggest question, is like, is Superman even relevant in 2024 or whenever we see this film?
And as of right now, it seems like he might be getting built back to being more relevant than he has been in years. We've just seen at the start of 2021, Philip Kennedy Johnson took over. I think it was 2021 when he took over.
Yeah.
He started rebuilding the comic book franchise of Superman after the Notorious Business era that was also received much like those films were, and people fell off that book. We've just seen Clark get rebuilt in comics. We've seen John Kent in this year alone make his breakout in comics. And then we've seen this incredible slate that they're lining up that is about to start in just a couple of months. All at the same time, David Zaslav took over Warner Brothers DC and said, "Where's Superman?" much like Neil Adams did when he walked into the offices and said, "Where's Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster?" There's some things that are fundamentally important to this brand, and that's what it looks like these creatives are doing. From the top down, David Zaslav, James Gunn, and all the creatives at DC Comics. And it's not slowing down. We just had a stellar year, and next year it's about to hit the ground running. We've been building up to Action Comics 1050, which is supposed to be this new formatting. Ryan, you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so up to this point, essentially, we had Superman, Son of Kal-El, and we had Action Comics, and they were kind of two different characters, two different storylines running parallel. Launching into 2023, we're going to get a reformat where Action Comics is actually going to have three different storylines going on and three individual stories, and they're going to focus on different characters. We're also going to have a Superman proper title that is going to focus on Clark as Superman, and then we're also going to have more of Jonathan Kent as Superman in Superman Adventures. So we're still going to have the two characters we've had running. We've had extra titles and stuff here and there. We've had backup stories, but essentially we're going to get all the other rest of the Superman cast in these other stories. And so we're going to have like a proper super family in 2023. They're basically bringing all these characters and kind of conglomerating them into the super family. Much like you have, Batman and the Bat family, you have Wonder Woman and all the other Wonder Women that make up like this Wonder Woman mythos. And so Superman has always kind of, for years has had this big grouping. And so now we're really going to get to see them all inserted into a proper title. And going into it, based on what we've seen the comic line look like in the previous years versus what we're looking at in 2023, it definitely feels like they're going to be putting Superman and his super family at the forefront of what DC Comics is.
Absolutely. And one thing to note is John Kent had this stellar year, really taking the reins and proving himself. And it's really nice to see that run that he did is just getting bled right over with the same creative team. We have Tom Taylor, who wrote Son of Kal-El, is going to be going to Adventures of Superman John Kent, which I'm absolutely pumped for. We're even seeing them do fun stuff with doing the Electric Blue stuff with him via the Lazarus Planet storyline. And to your point with the Action Comics and the Super Family, they're actually expanding that book out. We're going to have multiple creatives on that book, a handful of writers, including Philip Kennedy Johnson, which really, in my opinion, is one of the primary people that got us to this point of successful Superman comics again. And we're going to be seeing spotlighted characters as well as an ongoing story running through it. But there'll be mini stories in it so that we can actually spend time with these other characters so they just don't have to be Superman adjacent and side characters. They get to actually stand out in their own pages of the book, which is super important when you have characters that have been around this long, that have had their own titles coming over the years. There's a lot of character depth and stories that need to be told with them. And there's a lot of different diversity and angles you can tell these stories where it can hit a wide and massive audience and actually give people the opportunity to see if Superman's for them. Because we've seen so many new readers come into Superman this year firsthand. We've watched numerous people that we know that actually gave Superman a try, and they're like, I did not expect this. I did not know this. I just assumed he was a Boy Scout. I just assumed he's overpowered. None of these things are actually true. None of these things are how a Superman book goes when they're properly written. Of course, you can have bad writers from time to time, but they have absolutely pushed Superman and got him over, more over than he's been in years. And I hope to God to see these titles that are coming out land as well. Now, that Superman #1 that you mentioned, that one's being held by none other than Joshua Williamson, who just delivered Dark Crisis, who's done stuff like that legendary Flash run. He's going to be taking over the pages of this, which will be headlined under the Dawn of DC era, getting to that hopeful feel that you're supposed to get with Superman, that real positive dynamic which they're trying to bring in with this Dawn of DC era, which also brings us back around to why it's kind of necessary to realign your film brands with your comic brands. Everything doesn't have to be like Marvel. It's fine to do different things. It's fine to do the same. But one thing that's important for me is for these movies to send the comic shops new readers, and these comic shops to send the theater new viewers. And it looks like they're trying to just realign their brand, which we've watched DC rebuild this brand from 2021 when they did the massive layoffs, restructuring, and they only had like 10 titles on the shelf, and they rebuilt us to a large catalog that's about to explode next year. Now they're getting the toning down, the continuity's tying up, and they're restructuring their movie stuff. It all seems to be like if they really continue to commit to it, we can get a very cohesive brand across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited for what they're doing with with John Kent, because that's kind of the beauty of the super family dynamic, is that it enriches the characters, each individual character, right? So you got Clark Kent, he's got this dynamic, he's been Superman for a long time, but then you also have John Kent, who is basically a younger Superman. He has a different dynamic, though, because he's learning what it's like to be a Superman in a world that's already had a Superman. Clark Kent never had any expectation upon his shoulder, simply because there was no standard for who Superman is. John Kent comes into it taking, more or less taking up the mantle of his father, in which case there's already been a Superman. There are expectations for what he can and can't do and who he is. And so seeing him step into those shoes, at the same time we have the super family. We have these two new kids from War World that gives us the chance to see Clark Kent as like a fatherly figure and a protector of young children, and giving that kind of guidance to kids as they grow up, especially with these powers. And, then you have like Supergirl, where he has this weird relationship with his cousin who's got all these other dynamics going on in her head. She feels displaced because she's like the older cousin, but also the younger cousin, and she doesn't know where she fits in the world. So that's something else that really changes Clark Kent's dynamic. And what I think becomes really interesting in the movie scenario is that we're looking at a younger Superman. So where can we pull from all of these little elements? Well, what are the fans reacting to? What are they responding to? What do they like about John Kent? What do they like about Superman's dynamic with these kids? What do they like about his relationship with other characters within that mythos? And how can we pull that into something that plays well with a younger Superman? So I think we're going to get great stories in the comics that people are going to be able to relate to in every aspect. But I think it also gives them great, sample sizing to say, like, this is why people like these dynamics. How can we transfer that into a younger Superman and really create a character that we can connect with on the screen based on what we know from all the other stories that have been told about this character?
Needless to say, it's going to be a very interesting year with the way that they're going with it, from the announcements to these brand new titles. I'm excited to see what really hits. I'm excited to see where it even goes from here. This is only the beginning. So leave us a comment down below. Let us know what about Superman really shines through for you. Are you excited about these new titles? Do you feel he's still relevant? If not, let us know why not. And until next time, as always, I'm Mark, but we are Legion.